Chapter 1 Pronunciation. First things first, to start our journey in Japanese, we've got to know how to pronounce it. As it turns out, Japanese pronunciation is very straightforward compared to English. As a general rule, one letter is pronounced only one way, and as I mentioned before, there aren't very many sounds to begin with, so you're probably in for a pleasant surprise. Before we look at the vowels, I'd like to say a word about romanization. Romanization means writing words from another language in the alphabet that we use in English. The Roman alphabet. Typically, we tend to think of our alphabet as the English alphabet, but the fact of the matter is that the characters A to Z are used with a few minor variations in very many languages besides English. Our alphabet is actually called the Roman alphabet, since it goes all the way back to Latin. It's handy to be able to read and write Japanese using Roman letters, because that way we can start learning Japanese words without having to know how to read Japanese characters. It lets us jump right into the study of the language itself, but Roman letters really don't cut it for any sort of true study of Japanese. Japanese has two alphabets, more accurately called syllabaries. That name stems from the fact that unlike English, where one letter represents just a part of a sound, try to pronounce a k by itself, or k, every letter in the Japanese syllabaries represent an entire sound or syllable. So just one letter all by itself can be read ka. Starting from lesson 2, we'll start learning these syllabaries. Until we've mastered them, we'll use both Roman letters and the syllabaries to represent the Japanese words we encounter. However, by lesson 18, we'll be using these syllabaries exclusively. Although this may seem overwhelming right now, they are really easy to learn and understand. Japanese also uses a third character set called kanji, which was borrowed from Chinese. We'll discuss kanji in a bit more in the next lesson. But now, let's look up at a pronunciation in Japanese. We'll start with the vowels. This list is short and sweet. When written in Roman letters, the vowels are pronounced as follows. Touch each letter to hear it pronounced. As in father, never as in apple or cape. A. E. As in machine, never as in pit. U. As in Jupiter, never as in jump. E. As in pen, never as in peak. O. As in more, never as in on. There you have it. These vowel sounds are always pronounced as I have indicated. The never notes are just friendly reminders because as English speakers, we tend to allow letters that follow a vowel to influence a pronunciation of that vowel. For example, take the game company Nintendo. Most English pronouncers pronounce this name in a way that sounds very foreign to the Japanese ears. In the usual English pronunciation, the first part of the name rhymes with pin, with a short I sound. However, in Japanese, it's pronounced nin, because in Japanese, the vowel I is always pronounced the same way, E, regardless of what happens to follow it. Here are a few more examples of words that have an I sound in them. Notice that the following consonant doesn't change the pronunciation of the vowel. Nihonjin. Enpitsu. The Japanese O deserves a bit more distinction as well. In the introduction, we talked about how the vowel in an English word like no slides from an U ever so subtly into an oo sound, possibly a different sound in certain flavors of English. At the end, we noticed that we could see and feel our mouths changing shapes as we pronounce the word. In Japanese, this slide doesn't occur. The vowel O is just a single unchanging sound. The closest thing we have to this in English is the vowel from the word more. Try saying the word out loud, but stop before you get to the R sound. That's an almost perfect rendition of the Japanese O. More. Here are a couple of words that have an O sound in them. Neko. Ringo. Another note. In Japanese, letters don't have names like in English. For example, we call the letter I, no matter how it's actually being used in a word. Its name is I, but in Japanese, letters are just called by how they're pronounced. So when I refer to the sound you shouldn't read it you, but you just say oo, just like it's pronounced. As to the order of the vowels above, this is their proper order in Japanese. We'll learn more about this later. Doubled vowels. In English, when two vowels sit next to each other in a word, They play mysterious games with their pronunciation. For example, add an extra E to bet and you'd get a totally different pronunciation. The beat. Depending on your dialect, the word bin is yet different. Japanese has none of this nonsense. When two of the same vowels come in a row, the sound simply lasts twice as long. The vowel sound doesn't change, it just lasts longer. If you were to tap your finger at regular intervals, the word oku would take 2 beats. Oku, while uku would take 3 beats. U-ku. In fact, we can literally say the latter is a 3-syllable word. Take a listen to the following.
Oku, oku.
Oku, oku. When first learning about doubled vowels, it's a good idea to tap your finger while saying the word. Each syllable should get the same length of time. It's really important to give these doubled vowels and consonants their full value. And yes, it definitely can affect the meaning of your words.
Oku, oku.
Let's take a look at a few examples of doubled vowels.
A,
That means, oh my gosh, just an ah. Whereas
a,
it would just mean oh.
I,
It means stomach, while
I,
means good,
E,
means picture, while
E.
means yeah. The words on the left side of that table could be thought of as lasting for 1 syllable or 1 beat, while the later words on the right side last twice as long. Now I've told you that the vowels are always pronounced the same way. This isn't entirely true. There is one situation where a vowel may not be pronounced as I've shown on the vowel chart earlier. That situation has to do with extending the sounds E and O. Above, we doubled the E by simply writing another E at the end. On the previous page, for the word oku, we doubled the sound O by writing another O. There are words that work this way, but usually these two sounds are extended, not by writing another of the same vowel, as you would expect, but by writing I and U, respectively. In other words, the extended versions of E is usually written EI, not EE. Likewise, the doubled version of O is usually written OU, not OO. There are a few exceptions to this, but this holds true 95% of the time. Here are some examples of doubled E and O sounds.
Koko,
You can think of that as being ko with 4 syllables. That word means high school.
koko. Sensei,
So sensei could be thought of as se, n, se, e with 4 syllables. That word meaning teacher.
sensei. Tokyo,
That's Tokyo. So to, o, kyo, o. Meaning, of course, Tokyo.
eikyo,
Ekyo being kyo, o. Meaning influence.
eikyo.
And kyoshi,
Keiyoshi,
keyoshi. Let me repronounce that actually. Ke-e-yo-o-shi. And that word means adjective.
keiyoshi.
Well, doubled vowels are fine and dandy, you say, but what about when totally different vowels sit next to each other in a word? What happens then? It's natural that you should ask such a question. After all, in English, mysterious things happen, as I've illustrated beforehand. There's no need to worry in Japanese. All you have to do is pronounce both vowels in the way they're always pronounced. For example, if you say the word keiru, you would simply say ka-e-ru. The E does not exercise magical powers over the A in the way that it would in English. This is most definitely not pronounced keiru, as I did before. Just read the vowels the way that they're always read. So when you see the pair AI, you say AI, and the product sounds like the word I. See how straightforward that is? So that was spelled before A and I, so it'd be A. But in Japanese, that would sound like the word I. Here are a few more examples of various vowel combinations. Be sure to touch the words in the left column to hear the pronunciation.
Kaori,
That word means scent and could be broken down as kaori.
mainichi,
Mainichi would be every day. ma, I, ni, chi.
オアフ
Oahu. That's a Hawaiian island.
オアフ上
Ue, being ue, would mean top.
上
There's nothing tricky about Japanese vowels. The main thing is to pay careful attention to letter combinations that resemble words in English. For example, it might be tempting to read you as the word you, but really it's a two-syllable Japanese word, yo-o. Aside from that, you'll be alright if you just remember the following two rules. 1. Give each vowel its own distinct pronunciation. And 2. The only exceptions are that E is extended with I and O with U. Before we move on to the consonants, let's consider the following question. Does Japanese accent certain syllables like English? Stressing out. In English, we place extra heavy stress on one syllable in each word. For example, computer needs to be pronounced computer in order to sound right. For you linguistic types, this is called stress modulation because there is informational significance. Because there is informational significance to where the stress occurs. Does Japanese use stress modulation? Nope, not at all. This is one of the hardest points for us foreigners to conquer. We instinctively want to stress some parts of each word, but it sounds odd in Japanese. In Japanese, each syllable gets the same stress as the next, and as you progress through these lessons, you'll be able to hear this. It may be challenging at first, but try consciously to give each syllable the same stress. Let's listen to a few words pronounced the correct and incorrect way. The correct way is a recording of a native Japanese speaker, and the incorrect way is a recording of me pronouncing the word the way foreigners often do.
私
That's the native speaker. This is the foreigner. Watashi, meaning me or I. The native speaker saying you.
あなた
The foreigner. Anata. Again, the native.
あなた
And this word meaning car, kuruma.
車
Karuma, as the foreigner says.
車
Kuruma. Incidentally, notice that in English, the act of stressing one syllable causes the nearby vowel sound to change slightly. For example, say the words photo and photographer out loud and pay attention to the first syllable of each. See how it changes from a big fo in the first word to something more like f in the second? This is an effect that is very common in English, but never, ever occurs in Japanese. That means that one trick to make sure you're not stressing a particular syllable is to listen to yourself and make sure you're not changing any of the vowel sounds. So in the table above, when foreigners incorrectly stress the middle syllable of watashi, the first syllable is usually warped as a result, and the final word sounds like watashi. But wa is not a Japanese sound at all. So if you pay close attention and make sure you give each syllable the correct vowel sound, it'll also go a long way to making sure you aren't using unnecessary stress. Okay, let's move on to the consonants. So the consonant sounds are B sound, CH, D, F, G, H, J, K, M, and P, R, S, SH, T, SU, Y, and Z. If you were to just look at them, that's probably what they would look like, but let's take a listen to what they sound like. So it would actually, there's no audio here. So the B is pronounced as in boy. B. CH as in chocolate. Sh. D as in dog. The sound is a bit heavier than in English. The tongue pushes against the upper teeth and gums. It's similar to the Spanish D. So kind of like a de, more so than a da. F is in fox. However, the Japanese don't bite their bottom lip as we do when we say the sound. Let your upper teeth just barely touch your lower lip as you close your mouth naturally. G as in gate. Never a soft G as in George, so it'd always be a G. H as in hot. J as in jam. K as in kangaroo. M as in moon. N as in nice. P as in pencil. R we'll get to in a little bit. S as in snake. Sh as in shake. T as in tin. Su as in to eat soup. Wa as in want. Y as in you. So you. Z as in zoo. As you can see, there's nothing particularly surprising in the list. Each letter is pronounced pretty much as it is in English. This is probably because English speakers were the ones that picked which Roman letters would be used to represent Japanese. Note, the D sound is a bit heavier than in English. The tongue presses hard against the upper teeth and gums. If you were to move your tongue a little down, th sound would come out. So for some examples from a native speaker.
ダブダブ体
So we get that hard da. The F in Japanese, the Japanese don't bite their bottom lips as we do when we say this sound. So let your upper teeth just barely touch your lower lips as you close your mouth naturally. Since there's no lip biting, sometimes foreigners hear this as an H sound. For example,
夫婦
or
お風呂
so somewhere, if you can think of it ambiguously between like an F and an H sound, so like a hu could be a fu.
夫婦
You might have heard that as like a laughing sound in anime. And for R, this one deserves a little discussion. The sound R in English is a curious thing. You say it slowly and observe what happens with your mouth. The sides of your tongue touch the roof of your mouth, while the tip stays down to let air flow by. That sounds totally foreign in Japanese. The Japanese R is rather the opposite of the English R. It's made by a light flick of the tip of the tongue on the roof of the mouth. The closest thing we have in English is the sound that we make when a T or D occurs in the middle of a word. For example, say the word ladder normally, and pay close attention to that middle consonant. See how your tongue just brushes the top of your mouth? Ladder. If you're familiar with Spanish, you might notice that the sound is similar to a Spanish R, except that there isn't any trilling or rolling. It's just one touch. For example, my name is Rafael. I grew up in a Spanish-speaking household, so you would pronounce that as Rafael. Without a roll, it'd just be Rafael. Here's how to pronounce the Japanese R perfectly. Start with an English word that has one of those light tongue flicks in the middle, like regatta, as in a boat race, regatta. Say that out loud a few times and get comfortable with how it feels. Now change it to kata and use exactly the same tongue flick. This sounds almost identical to the Japanese word kara. Here are a few examples.
から車お風呂
Of course, the most important thing is to listen to others, and to listen to yourself. As we work through this book, pay close attention to how the Japanese speakers say things and imitate them.
から車お風呂
Kara, kuruma, ofuro. Doubled consonants work in much the same way as the doubled vowels. The concept is the same. When two of the same consonants appear next to each other, the consonant lasts for 2 beats instead of 1. But how do you make a consonant last twice as long? You pause on the consonant for an extra beat. Therefore, in the word meta, you would pronounce me and take your tongue up into position for the ta sound. But before doing that, you freeze right there for 1 beat, so to speak. Finally, you say that ta sound. Try and compare it to the sound of the version with no consonant doubling.
めためった
So you have the meta versus meta. So you have a little gap between them. When writing Japanese and Roman letters, consonants are doubled by writing the letter twice. Let's take a look at a few examples.
めった
And that would mean hardly versus
めた
which has no meaning.
結婚
Kekon means marriage versus
結婚
kekon means nothing.
結婚
Marriage
しっぽ
means tails. So you would have shi po And
しぼ
shippo has no meaning, but
しぼ
means tail.
日本
Nippon means Japan, but
日本
Nippon doesn't have any meaning. Incidentally, we happen to have something similar to this in the English with the word lamppost. Notice that the first time you spend the P combo in the middle is much longer than what you would spend on the same letter in the fictional word lamb post. That doubling of time is essentially the same as a doubling you see in the Japanese word in the above table.
日本
Summary. That's it. With what you've learned in this chapter, you can now read any Japanese word you lay eyes on. To recap, Japanese pronunciation is straightforward, but different from English in a couple key ways. First, vowels can be extended, which means making them last longer in duration. In writing, vowels are extended by writing two of the same vowel in a row. Or in the case of O and E, adding U and I respectively. That is, the extended version of O is O, and the extended version of E is E. Similarly, consonants can also be doubled, which causes an on-beat pause to be inserted before pronouncing the consonant. In writing, consonants are doubled by writing two of them in a row. For example, in the word gaka, the speaker stops and waits for one beat before pronouncing the ka sound, so it'd be more like gaka. Although there are a few challenging consonants for English speakers, such as the hard R sound, on the whole, Japanese pronunciation is pretty easy to understand. Now that we can pronounce Japanese, let's learn a thing or two about how the writing system works.